Okay, good Davach everyone, as we welcome in Saba, and we welcome in Menachem Umansky, Yitzi Fuchs, Aaron Swade, Bruce Eisenberg, Nachman Chapler, A.B. Spry, Shimon Klein, Mel Zachter, Eddie Chazan, Mordechai Sultan, Dr. Black, Irving Fishman, Ben Zion Cohn, Shimon Deer, Marshall Castle, Naftali Javelin, Avram Schenkman, Ilya Shutman, Larry Tuchinski, David Helfgott on Kala Lashon. We have over here in Shul, Reb Blumenfeld and Berish Gessman so far. And we are dedicated by A.B. Spry for the safety of our troops and of all of Klal Yisrael. Especially for Issa Zev Ben Yuta. We are dedicated by Shimon Klein, Leon Nishmas Ashra, Anshel Ben Yehuda, Gitta Bar Shimon Pinchas, Irving Fishbaum for his good health, Issa Ben Rezel, for Avigdor Aya Ben Rivka, and Meir Ben Chayesar. They should have Rufu Shalema B'Seich Sheikha Yisrael. We have a night of learning planned tonight. Hashem should give Siyata Dishmaya. We're planning to learn 2 blat, and then we're planning to do a chok, and then we're planning to do a challenging 2 mishnayos in Yavama. So it's a night of fun here on the Rabbi Moshe Meir Weiss Network, as is Hashem Yisbarach, and we are starting at the 2 dots on Chav Ches Amud Beis. Rabbi Yehuda Aimer b'miskaven chayiv. So the Gemara says, okay, and we'll familiarize ourselves in a minute of what we're talking about. Rabbi Yehuda says, with intent you're chayiv. So, heichi dami miskaven. Intent means what? Amar Rabbah, it's talking about where we have to pick somebody. Okay, Marshall. He convinced me. So Marshall is walking on the street with a pitcher, and it's Mel's pitcher. And he was mischaven lorida lamata miksefai. He had in mind to bring it down from his shoulder, and he tripped and banged against the wall. So Amalei Abaya, so Abaya says that means that Reb Meir, who is the Tanakama, holds that he's chayiv even if he was holding it and the handle just disintegrated in his hand. Amalei Abaya mechlal de mechayiv Reb Meir afilu nifshara, even if it just disintegrated. Amalei in mechayiv Reb Meir afilu azna biyada. He was holding the handle and it crumbled in his hand. So Gemara says, I mean, after all, the Gemara will come to the defense, even like someone like Marshall. Amai, anasu. Why should he be chayiv? He's an einus. V'einus rachmana patre. And the Torah exempts an einus. Dichsiv, it says, ulanara lo yisasa davar. And if the young maiden is raped, so then we don't do anything to her, because she's an einus. That's only an exemption from capital punishment. But when it comes to damages, Marshall is chayiv even if it's an einus. But we learn not that way. Vatanya, and this is a longer brisa, nishbara kadai v'loy salkai. If somebody's pitcher breaks in the Rosh Hashanah and he doesn't clean it up, nafle gamloi v'loy hamidai, if his camel collapse and he doesn't pick it up, Rameya mechayiv b'chezek, and Rameya holds his chayiv. V'chachamim aimim pater, and the chacham say pater. We'll see what they're arguing with later. Pater medine adam, v'chayiv medine shemaim. He's chayiv morally. Umaydim chacham Rameya, the chacham agree with Rameya, but avnei sakina maso, if he has a stone, a knife, or a backpack, shanichon b'reish gaga, that he put on the ledge of his roof, and it fell in an expected wind, and does damage, that he's chayiv, because that he should have anticipated. And Rameir agrees with the Rabbanan, b'malek kankanin alagag, when he put jugs on his rooftop, almanas l'nagvan, in order that they should dry, and then all of a sudden there was a 100-mile gale force, v'nafla beruach sheina mitzuya, and it fell with an unexpected wind, v'ziku shu pater. So you see, if it's an einus, everybody agrees that it's pater. So therefore, what is the machlokes over here between Reb Meir and Reb Yehuda? So now the Gemara tells us, and if you're just joining us, we are 6 lines from the top of Chavtes Amud Aleph, just getting on the way on a marathon Motzei Shabbos. Ela Amar Abaye, as we welcome in the David family, the Sandy Grunfeld, says the Gemara, Ela Amar Abaye betarte pligi. Reb Meir and Reb Yehuda are arguing with 2 issues. B'shas pligi b'shas nefila. They argue when the pitcher does damage when it's falling, or pligi la'achar nefila. And they argue when the pitcher does damage after it fell. And now let's analyze what Marshall's liability over here is. Pligi b'shas nefila, they argue if Marshall is walking around and he falls, and while he falls, the pitcher hurts someone. Beniskal peshay, they're arguing if tripping is considered negligence. Mar savar niskal peshehu, one holds that tripping is considered negligence. Or mar savar niskal la peshehu, that's not negligent to trip. And pligi la'achar nefila. They also argue if it shattered and it did damage after it fell. What are they arguing about? They're arguing b'mafkir nechasav, where when it fell, Marshall renounced his ownership of the fragments. Mar savar mafkir nezakav chayiv, that where he's mafkir his damages, he's still chayiv. Or mar savar poter, and one holds he's poter. So the Gemara says, how do we know that they're arguing in 2 cases? Umamai. So the Gemara says, because the Mishnah says 2 cases. Midiketoni tarte, it says 2 cases. Hoklak echad b'mayim, one that slips on the water. Oisha loka b'charsis, or he got hurt with a fragment. Hainu lahach, it seems to be the same thing. Alav ha'achi, what it means, ha'achi kam. Hochlik echad b'mayim, he slips on the water, b'shas nefila, as it's flying out of Marshall's hand, and it's Marshall's force. And they're arguing if the fact that he tripped is Yechayiv or it's negligence. It's Yechayiv because it's negligence or not. Oisha loka b'charsis, or somebody got hurt on a fragment, la'achar nefila, and it's a question where you're chayiv if you renounced ownership of the fragments. Now the Gemara says, since in the Mishnah they're arguing in 2 issues, so the Gemara wants to suggest Braisa Nami Betarte. In the Braisa where Rameir and Rabbanan argue where the pitcher broke and the camel fell, the Gemara wants to say that over there they're also arguing in 2 issues. The Masnisim betarte, Braisa Nami betarte. So the Gemara says, Bishloi Mekadai, the pitcher, Mishkachasla, Oy Bishas Nefila, somebody gets hurt while he fell, Oy Lacha Nefila, or after it broke and he was mafkarit. Ele Gamloi, his camel, Bishloi Melacha Nefila, what happened was the camel fell, died, and he was mafkid in Avela. Bishloi Melacha Nefila, so that would be a case. Mishkachas, we find a case where the mafkir nivlasai, where it was mafkir the camel. So the machlokes is where you're mafkir nezakav, are you chayav or not? Ela b'shas nefila eichi mishkachas, because here it's a camel. What are you going to say? They're arguing whether if the camel stumbles, it's a pshia or not. Amar Ravacha, no. The question is, kigain the avra b'maya. What happened is that Marshall was taking his camel derech sarato denara. in an area where the water on the beach swelled out. The water it flooded the area, and therefore when the animal was taken there, it tripped because it couldn't see where it's going. And the question is whether Marshall was negligent by taking him in that area. So the Gemara says, this has nothing to do with Marshall, but it says, "Hechi dummy." You know what I mean? You know what I mean? "Hechi dummy." What's the case?
That was Barry. How did I get that?
I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just saying the Gemara. "Hechi dummy." What's the case? If there was another way for him to go and he took that area where the camel can't see where it's going, then everybody will hold he's negligent. If there's no other way, then he's an einus. Then why would anybody say that he's chayiv, even though he's marshal? Ella says to Gemara, "Mishkachas lo the askel." What happened was his marshal tripped, the askel bei gamla, and the camel tripped over him. So if you hold niska pesheya, then he's chayiv. If you hold niska la pesheya, then he's pater. As we welcome in Mark Frankel joining us, and Mark, if you want to know where we're up to, we're 8 lines from the bottom of Daf Chavtes Amud Aleph, just getting underway on Marathon Motzi Shabbos. Says the Gemara, Mafkir Nizchsakav, if it's talking about where he's Mafkir is Nechasim, then what does Rabbi Yehuda mean if he's Miskavein Iskayev? My Miskaveinika, as we welcome in Rabbi Kranz, my Miskaveinika, says the Gemara, what it means is, Amar Rav Yosef b'miskavein liskais becharseh, that if Marshall has in mind to reacquire the pieces, then he would be chayiv. In other words, Rabbi Yehuda holds mafkir nechas of his potter, but if he's miskaven to reacquire it, then he would be chayiv. Now, we are, Rabbi Kranz, welcome. We're 6 lines from the bottom of Daf Chavtes Amud Aleph. Rabbi Kranz, do we have a report about your niece, how she's doing? Can't hear you, Rabbi Kranz.
The last time I heard is that she might be moved down from ICU to a regular floor.
Let's have her name.
It's Shoshana Bracha Bas Rivka Yehudis.
Shoshana Bracha Bas Rivka Yehudis. She was injured in the last terrorist attack in Yerushalayim, and Hashem should grant her refuah shlema b'seich sharcha Yisrael. Welcoming in Gedalia Engel, just arriving. It comes from a distance, and the Kirsch family is welcome as well. So now, Rabbi Lazar Reimer b'shas nefila machlokes. Now that's his statement. His statement is they argue when Marshall falls and it does damage. In other words, they're arguing whether niskal is a pesheya or not a pesheya. Now, what does that mean? The Gemara queries, Aval acha nefila mai, but if it damages after it fell, when it's hefker, divra kol potter, everybody holds potter, but Rameya said it's chayiv. Says the Gemara, Va'ika Rameya de Mechayiv. How could you say? The Rameya says that if it fell and he doesn't remove it, so then he's chayiv. So how could you say that everybody holds potter? Elamai, no, divrei akol chayiv, but the Rabbanan argue in Rameya. Va'ika Rabbanan de Patre. Elamai, says the Gemara, when we're going to reinterpret what Rabbi Lazar means. When Rabbi Lazar says b'shas nefila machlokes, he means to say that they're even arguing b'shas nefila. Elamai b'shas nefila, af b'shas nefila, because they're also arguing about niskal pesheya. V'kamash long k'dabaya, like Abaya, that they argue both b'shas nefila and la'achar nefila. As we turn the page, 15 minutes and 9 seconds that we're already turning the page. It's very good. It's a really. Rabbi Yochanan says la'achar nefila machlokes, that they argue about after it fell. In other words, whether mafkin is chasav is chayav or not. So the Gemara says, aval b'shas nefila mai, but when he is falling, when Marshall is falling and it does damage, divrei akol potter, everybody holds potter. In other words, nobody holds that niskal is pesheya. V'had medika'amar Rabbi Yochanan come don't say the Mishnah is going according to Rameir. So that means that there is an opinion that you are chayav b'shas mefila. Mechal the Rameir mechayiv. So it must be elamai divrei akol chayiv. But that can't be either. Don't say that the Mishnah is going according to Rameir. That means the Rabbanan argue and say that niskal is not a b'sheya. Mechal the patre Rabbanan. Ella says to Gemara, what does it mean? Rabbi Yochanan amar la'achar nefila machlokes. What Rabbi Yochanan means is that which we have an opinion over here, that mafker nechasav is potter, that if Marshall renounces the fragment is potter, that's only over here where the initial existence of the fragments in the Rishus Harabim was by accident, because he tripped. It's only over here, El Hakamashman the Nafka the Zach of the Hacho the Pater Rabbanan, the Anasu, because how did they get into the Rishus Harabim initially? Because he stumbled. Aval mafker nezak of the alma, but a regular mafker nezak can, for example, if he threw something into the Rishus Harabim purposely, and then he was mafker it, then everybody holds mechayve. Everybody holds that it's chayiv. So when Rabbi Yochanan says la'achar nefila machlokes, it's not coming to indicate, but b'shas nefila there's no machlokes. There's machlokes, but it means that it's only over here because it finds itself initially there, not on purpose. It's because he stumbled. But Einachanami, if he tripped, if he threw something in the Rishus Harabim, he would be chayiv, even if he's mafkir. Now, Itmar, mafkir nizakav. Now let's talk about this more. He renounced his obstacles. Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Elazar. It's a machlokes Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Elazar. Now again, it's ambiguous. We don't know who holds what. Chad amar chayiv, v'chad amar potter. So the Gemara says, Lema manda mechayiv k'Rameir. Let's say the one that holds your chayiv is like Rameir, that if you don't remove it and you don't pick up the camel, you're chayiv. O manda potter k'Rabbanan. So the Gemara says, Alib de Rameir. According to Rameir, kuli amalei pligi. According to Rameir, everybody holds that you're chayiv. Why? Because for sure, if you're mafkir nechasav that come about through an einus you're chayiv, then surely if you're mafkir nezakav without an einus, you're surely chayiv. Ki pligi ali b'Rabbanan. Where do they argue? They argue according to Rabbanan, as we were in Reb Krause. It's wonderful to have you. Ki pligi ali b'Rabbanan. They argue according to Rabbanan. Man de potter k'Rabbanan. The one that exempts holds like the Rabbanan. Uman de mechayev amalach anod amrei afilu Rabbanan. Ad kan like a potter Rabbanan al b'mafkir dechasav dehacha, where it came after an einus. Mishum da'anasu. Aval mafkir nezak of the alma, but a regular case mechayve. So the Gemara says, so now let's try to ascertain which one is it that holds mafkir nezakav is chayiv. Is it Rabbi Eliezer or it's Rabbi Yochanan? So this is going to be interesting. Tistayim, the Rabbi Elazar hu damar chayiv. That it's Rabbi Elazar that's the one that says mafkir nezakav is chayiv. The Amar Rabbi Elazar mishum Rabbi Yishmael The idea is that you're chayiv for something even though you don't own it. Now, that's the pashtus of bar b'rishus harabim. If you dig a bar in the rishus harabim, you're chayiv. So that shows that even though you don't own it, you're chayiv. Those that say mafkir nizakav is potter, they hold that the din of bar b'rishus harabim is only where you dig a bar on your property, and then you're mafkir the area around it. So it's still your bar. But if it's hefker, you're not chayiv. So the Gemara says, it would seem to be that if there's somebody that holds you're chayiv, it must be Rabbi Lazar. Why? Dam Rabbi Lazar Mishum Rabbi Yishmael. This is a famous Shas statement. Rabbi Lazar says in the name of Rabbi Yishmael, Shnei dvarim einon b'rishus shel adam. There's two things not in a person's possession. V'osen hakasav ki'ilu ein b'rishusai. And the Torah makes it as if it is in his possession. Ve'elu hein bar b'rishus harabim. So bar b'rishus harabim is not in your rishus. It belongs to the public. And yet, you're chayiv. And v'chamesh mishei shoyis u'lamala. And chametz after 6 hours on Erev Pesach. So chametz after 6 hours on Erev Pesach, we know that it's not yours because a Jew doesn't own chametz at that time, and the Torah makes it as if it's yours and you're chayiv. Right? So that's two things that something that's not yours and it's considered as if it's yours. So that is a pure raya that Rebbe Lezer holds that mafkir nizakav you're chayiv. What?
He said only two things.
Right.
This would be a third.
No, mafkir nizakav would be bar.
Oh,
Bar is a nezik. And it's not yours because it's in rishus harabim.
but the shards and all of that,
That's mafkir nizakav. That's a bar.
it's the category.
Right, that's a category of bar. Now, I just want to clarify again that I said that chametz after 6 hours, since chametz after 6 hours is osir ba'ana, you're not allowed to benefit from it. Since you don't have any benefit, it's not considered like it's yours. However, you are chayiv, you're chayiv for it, even though it's not considered yours. So those are two cases. Says the Gemara, but wait a second. Umi amar Rabbi Lazar hachi? Does Rabbi Lazar hold that mafkin is zakav chayiv? V'amar Rabbi Lazar ibcha. We have Rabbi Lazar on record not that way. Did not. Now this is something that Marshall does often. Walking to the car shop. Ha'hoichvech es hagolo b'rishus harabim. If he picks up some dung and he turns it over, right? So dung is very good for fertilizer. So he picked it up and he turned it over in the rishus harabim.
Why me?
And why not? V'hozik be'anachar, and look at this. He wakes up after 6,748 cases, and he says, "Why me?"
Well, I don't have gloves. Why me?
Okay, buy yourself a good pair of gloves, Marshall. Ha'hoifech es hagolo b'rishus harabim, and ha'hoifech, you should know, is begematria Marshall Castle without the koilel. Ha'hoifech es hagolo b'rishus harabim. If he turns over the dung in the rishus harabim, v'huzik behen achar, and somebody else gets damaged on it, chayiv b'niskai, he's chayiv for damages. V'amar Rabbi Lazar lo yishanu ela shenischavein liskais b'hem. That's only if he attended when he picked it up to acquire it. Aval lo nischavein liskais b'hem, but if he didn't intend to acquire it, he's potter. Right? So that means that he's not chayiv, although he placed a hazard, because when he picked it up and he put it back down, he placed the hazard. So although he placed the obstacle, he's not chayiv if he doesn't own it. So you see that Rabbi Lazar doesn't hold on mafkir nizak of his chayiv. Says the Gemara, Avaloy nischaven lispchem potter, alma mafkir nizak of potter. Says the Gemara, no, Marshall didn't do anything. When he picked it up, he returned it back to the place that it was. So he didn't do anything. So if he intended to acquire it, so now it's his, so he's chayiv. If he didn't, it's, the one that put it down originally that's chayiv, not Marshall. Like Marshall says all the time, what did I do? Right? He's very good at that.
Take this from nobody.
Right. Amar Ravina, Marshall the Rav Adabar Ava Lamaha Davadayim, arguing why Marshall should be potter. Lamaitze bar megula v'chiso. If Marshall found an uncovered pit, and he covered it, v'chazav v'gileu, and then he uncovered it again, he's not chayiv. He didn't do the original obstacle. Why should he be chayiv? Says the Gemara, no. It's not the same. Amalei mazutra breder amari ravina mi dami. It's not comparable to the case where he took the cover off, he put a cover on and he took it off. Hasam lo yistaleklu ma'aserishin. The person, Mordechai, who dug the pit, when Marshall covered it, he didn't erase what Mordechai did. So then when he uncovers it, Mordechai's pit is still there. When Marshall picked up the dung, the Mordechai that put down the dung, when Marshall picked it up, he erased Mordechai's obstacle. So when he puts it down, he should be chayiv. The fact that he's not chayiv must be because of mafkin and chasav. He didn't have a mind to acquire it. His potter. If Marshall found a uncovered pit utamama and he filled it up, and then v'chazav v'chafara, and then he dug it again, so then Mordechai's off the hook. The stalaklu ma'aserisha b'kaimel b'rishusay. It's his rishus. So it must be that the reason when Marshall puts down the dung is because he didn't acquire it, and therefore it's not his, and I'm after his cost in the zakah of his potter. Says the Gemara, Elama Ravashi, no. Really, Rabbi Eliezer could still hold I'm after his zakah of chayiv. But what happened over here is what Marshall did is he picked it up and he turned it around, but he never picked it up 3 tvachim. And therefore, since it's within the shir of Lavud, he never erased that Mordechai put it down on the ground. It was within 3 tvachim from the ground. So therefore, he never erased what Mordechai did by putting it down. So Gemara says, why did we learn it this way? The time, and it's only b'chinas kavin liskis, if he had in mind to be zeichenet, so it says ha'ein miskavin liskis b'lai. But if he doesn't have in mind that, lukma l'mayla mishloisha. Say that it's talking about where it's higher than 3 tvachim. If it's higher than 3 tvachim, then Marshall erased what Mordechai did, and then that's why he's chayiv. And then even if he didn't intend, he would be chayiv. So he says, no, that can't be pshat. Because if it was above 3 tvachim, it should have said higvia. Amarava Masnisan Kashmi say there's a technical diak in the Mishnah. Mayer Yohafach, why does it say he turned it around? Listen, higvia, he lifted it up. Elishmami not kol hafach lamata mishloishu. It was within 3 tvachim from the ground. So therefore, there's no kasha on Rabbi Eliezer holding that you're chayiv for nezakav that's hefker. The reason why Marshall is not chayiv over here is because he never negated Mordechai's putting down the dung. He didn't have a mind to acquire it, and he didn't lift it more than 3 tvachim, that it considered that he was mevatel Mordechai's action, mistalik Mordechai's action, and then he would be mechayev for his own action. Now, says the Gemara, but now we have a different problem. Because Umedu Rabbi Lazar Amar Chayev, and we brought what seemed to be a pretty nifty proof that Rabbi Lazar is Chayev when you don't own it, because he says 2 things that you're Chayev when you don't own, bar and chametz. So Umedu Rabbi Lazar Amar Chayev, Rabbi Yochanan Amar Potter. It must be the Rabbi Yochanan holds that if you're mafker nizakav, you're Potter. Says the Gemara, but Rabbi Yochanan doesn't say that. Umi Amar Rabbi Yochanan Hachi. Did Rabbi Yochanan say that? V'tanan, this is going to be a Mishnah that we're going to learn on the second blot tonight. If Marshall puts a thorn or fragments of glass in a wall that's rickety in the Rishus Harabim, or he makes a fence with thorns sticking out into the public thoroughfare, or v'geder shenafel Rishus Harabim, v'uzik b'anachar, or a wall that fell in Rishus Harabim, and somebody else got damaged with it, chayev b'niskay. Marshall is chayev for all those cases. Many suits against Marshall. V'amar Rabbi Yochanan lo yishanu ela b'mafriach. It's only if he trains his thorns of his wall outward towards the Rishus Harabim. Aval b'mitzamtzing, but if it's facing in his own property, potter. Now, mitzamtzing my time at the potter. Why if the thorns are not sticking out into the Rishus Harabim? Why does he hold that it's potter? Isn't that because it's considered a pit that he made on his own property? And it must be that Rabbi Yochanan holds for a pit on your own property, you're not chayiv. It's the pit in the Rishus Harabim that you're chayiv. So that means mechlal the chiyuva the bar b'Rishus Harabim. So that means that he holds hamafker nizakav is chayiv. El hamafker nizakav chayiv. Says Gemara loy. Loy lamei malach mafker nizakav potter. A bar in Rishus Harabim, you're potter. And the case of bar in the Torah is where you have a bar in your Rishus and people are allowed to walk near it. So then why does he hold if the thorns are not sticking out, he's potter? Or mitzamtzim, my time of potter, that's for a different reason. Mishum de Imra Allah, it's not, most people when they walk in the Rishus Harabim, they don't rub their bodies on a wall. Mishum de Amar Allah, Amar Ravach B'rei Ravika, Lefi Shein Darkan Shnei Adam, L'Ischachek M'Ksalim. An animal, a human is not an animal. An animal might rub against the wall. Humans don't rub against the wall. So as long as the thorns are not sticking out, Marshall, blessedly, is not going to be chayiv. Right? It's a rare case. Says the Gemara, wait a second. So you want to tell me that Rabbi Yochanan holds mafker the zakav is potter? Omi Amar Rabbi Yochanan Achi, can Rabbi Yochanan hold that way? V'Amar Rabbi Yochanan, all over Shas, Rabbi Yochanan says halacha kistam mishnah. Halacha is like an anonymous mishnah. Usanan, and we learned hachayfer bar b'Rishus Harabim. You dig a bar in the Rishus Harabim. V'nafel eseicha shayar chamar umeis chayiv. And a shar or a chamar falls in and dies chayiv. So you see he holds clearly. He holds clearly that even though you don't own the bar, that's Rishus Harabim, you're chayiv. So he must hold hamafker nizakav chayiv. El lo'ilam Rabbi Yochanan chayiv. So that means Rabbi Eliezer says potter. But how could Rabbi Eliezer say potter? He says 2 things that are not in your rishus and you're still chayiv. Omid Rabbi Yochanan chayiv, Rabbi Eliezer potter. Can't be. V'amar Rabbi Eliezer mishum Rabbi Yishmael, that 2 things that are not in your rishus and you're chayiv. Says there's the answer. that Rabbi Elazar says in the name of his Rebbe. His Rebbe holds chayiv. But Rabbi Elazar himself holds that mafkin is of his potter. Like Kasha Adi Day, one is his statement on the Ravya, one is his Rebbe's statement. Okay, we're just going to turn the channel over here, 1 second.